Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for this conversation about the challenges facing lower income single mothers and their children and what we can do in North Carolina to improve their chances for success. I'm Tammy Grubb, and this year I'm diving into the issue of poverty for a special report from the News and Observer, in addition to my regular reporting from Chapel Hill and Orange County. The conversation tonight will start with a prepared list of questions for our panelists. We will do our best to cover as many questions as possible with the time that we have. Additional coverage will be available on our website, www.newsobserver.com, over the next several months, and you can follow me on Twitter at @TammyGrubb. Over 1 in 3 of North Carolina's 1.2 million families living below the federal poverty line are single mothers with children under age 18. That's nearly 500,000 working poor families headed by women who cannot pay their bills and put food on the table without private and government assistance programs such as SNAP food stamps. But the true need is much greater and growing. As the cost of groceries, gas, and other goods rise, and families struggle to find affordable housing and childcare. A recent analysis from the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center found that 33% of the state's households are struggling to keep up with even basic expenses. However, we are learning from single mothers and family advocates and policy advocates that there are things that state and federal lawmakers can do to help. Joining us tonight is Heba Atwa, a policy advocate with the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center, State House Representative Ashton Wheeler Clemens, a Democrat from Guilford County, and LaSharon Getty, a single mother raising 5 children in Raleigh. Thank you all for being here with us tonight to talk about this important topic. So I'd like to start just by explaining that one of the first things we learned from our reporting is that the government's definition of poverty is outdated. The nonpartisan North Carolina Budget and Tax Center and the North Carolina Justice Center have done significant research and advocacy on this topic. So I'd like to first hear from Heba about the poverty level and why it's important to get an accurate measure. Heba?
Thank you, Tammy. That's a great question. So I want to say that when I read your article, I saw comments underneath vilifying single mothers with kind of the same old rhetoric, right? So right now, that narrative and rhetoric reinforce the idea that poverty is the result of personal choices when we know that it's a systemic issue. It's not going to be solved with fewer lattes or nail salon visits. And how we define poverty is so important because it's used to determine eligibility for the crucial assistance programs that you mentioned, for example, SNAP, food assistance, or TANF cash assistance. And also it informs our perspective on exactly how pervasive poverty is in our state. So as I mentioned, the pervasive rhetoric pushes the notion that the issue of poverty is confined to the other, when in fact we know that between 60 and 70% of Americans make use of the safety net at some point in their lives. And 40% of families with children in North Carolina recently reported struggling to meet basic needs. So with the existing narrative and philosophy, we're punishing the kids in our state. We're keeping kids in poverty, especially kids of color. Poverty is a policy choice, and the choice to limit investments in our kids and families has served to keep more kids from opportunity, to deprive them of those basic needs, support, and economic services that improve quality of life and extend quality of life, because income poverty has an actual impact on duration, not just quality of life. So every decision we make to cut funding to programs that help families afford basic needs, we're making choices that mean that those kids will live years longer than their wealthier counterparts. We're choosing to keep them in a cycle of poverty instead of insisting that every single one of our North Carolina kids be given the chance to thrive. So when we think about measuring and defining poverty, it's so crucial, not only because it's used for the purposes of determining whether or not a family is eligible for services, But having a measurement that accurately reflects what it actually takes any given family size in a given community to make ends meet helps us understand how many people are actually living in income poverty and what we need to invest to ensure that those kids in our state are able to thrive.
It's really interesting, and in some ways I'm sad that we got those comments. I received many of those as well. My understanding, though, is that in talking with you and others, is that there are other ways that we can measure poverty, and those results are a little or even vastly different from what we already get from the federal poverty guidelines. Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And so, first, I should say the federal poverty level, it was ushered into use, and I think most people are pretty familiar with it. So it was ushered into use in about the mid 1960s, and it was derived from the cost estimate of we'll say, a very conservative diet. The cost of very conservative diet multiplied by 3. So the idea being that the average family spends about a third of their income on food. Now, this is problematic for a few reasons. It's problematic because it has not been adjusted except for inflation. It isn't localized, and it doesn't take into account the reality of what it takes to make ends meet, including costs like housing and childcare, and how much those costs have risen over time. So you asked about other measures. At the Budget and Tax Center, we prefer the living income standard. We believe it's a more accurate measure of what it takes to make ends meet in any given community. So it's a localized estimate of costs of basic needs, including food, healthcare, housing, transportation. It does not, however, include things like meals out, entertainment, or savings. It's a very conservative estimate. So let me give you an example. The living income standard for a family of 3, so that's 1 adult and 2 children in our state, is around $60,000 annually. So that's 2.6 times the federal poverty level. And to put that into further perspective, the median worker earnings in our state are around $38,000. So if we think about that parent in that 3-person family, they'd be required to work 161 hours per week at minimum wage to reach that living income standard. And if we look at more expensive counties like Wake and Mecklenburg, that dollar figure to meet basic needs, it actually increases to around $70,000 for that single family with 2 children. So as I mentioned again, when we understand how much it actually takes to afford basic needs where we live, we can better understand the investments necessary to support families, and we can understand exactly how many people are living in income poverty who are really struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah, thank you for providing that example. I think that brings it more home to people, because it's when you talk about percentages or poverty levels or whatever, I think most people don't really understand what that means. But when you talk dollars and cents, we can all understand what that means and how it reflects in our own lives. I did want to swing over to La Sharon. As a single mother with children, you've lived a lot of what we just talked about. And so I'd like to just hand it over to you for a few minutes to talk about your own experience and what you think about the official definition of poverty versus what you're seeing in your own life.
Thanks, Tammy. I am living currently in the situation. I've been kind of on both sides of the fence where I've worked before and taken care of my family. And even then, I was still considered a person of poverty, living in a home, working, and I was working 2 or 3 jobs at a time and attending college while taking care of my children. And I still struggled. There were times that I did not make enough to receive food stamps. So I was still struggling from one end to the next. Now I am currently, living not in my own home and in an extended stay situation. And I'm still a person of poverty. So I just wish that there was a more or clear definition of what poverty is, um, for everyone, because nail salons and lattes are the least of the worries when it comes to what you figuring out if you can put gas in your car or feed your children. If you know, especially in situations such as mine, where you know you're done wrong by agencies or landlords. What do you do in situations such as that? It's not, homelessness and poverty does not look the same on every forefront, and I think that's what I'm trying to explain. It can, you, poverty is a broad spectrum of things. You can be in a home and still be living in poverty. But I don't know. I haven't looked at any comments. I try not to look at things like that because it puts you in a worse situation than what you already are in. When it comes to outside critiques and conversations, living the way we are, we hear these things every day. So, I mean, I'm blown away, actually.
One of the things that I did hear, in addition to those, I got a couple of calls from people who said, it just sounds hopeless. Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
no hope. Just tell these women there's no hope,
Yep.
which I thought was a pretty harsh thing to say in the first place.
Yep.
But we talked about, hope, and you talked a
Mm-hmm.
little bit to me and to Caitlin also about how hopeless it seems sometimes, but there are things that keep you motivated. What sort of things do you look to when you hit those dark nights when you're sitting up trying to find housing?
I look towards God. I look towards my children. I look towards myself. I feel like people are entitled to their opinions, and I do believe that a fresh start or a new beginning does start with yourself. I don't sit back and depend on anybody to just go out here and do something for me. I have degrees. I want to be a self sufficient person. But there are some of us that don't have the support or have the self motivation to know what self sufficiency is. So when it comes to that, you can have your kids all day. I have two little girls right now that are with me because mom was homeless and she gave up. You, we need more agencies to be there to get on the ground and aid us, aid ladies and aid disabled people and aid elderly people into what the self sufficiency is. You could have a moment where you were doing good in life and you fall down. Be there to pick us up, not put us back down. I seem strong, but there are days and moments throughout the one single day that I have moments where I just feel like giving up. And I can only imagine what it's like for someone who doesn't have a mindset such as mine, or who doesn't know how to go out here and ask for help, or has issues with pride. Um, it is humiliating, but with humiliation, you find humbleness, and it's very discouraging. And there's a lot of agencies that I work with personally that they will make you feel like it's hopeless, and they give you the look like you're hopeless. They basically, their actions speak louder than words. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I think that's always a good tell. I did want to ask you real quick before we move on. You came in with some of your children tonight, and you guys had
Yes.
special shirts on. And I wanted to
Yes.
ask you just real quickly to hit on what you've done in terms of helping them with their education, because we all know that's really central to kids at any income level to be successful in
Yes.
life.
And especially children of color and children living in situations of poverty. Gifted Minds Academy is an academy that I started in March of 2019 when I lived in a small community in New Hanover County. I've been homeschooling my children since 2016, And I saw the progress of me working with my children and the flexibility of it. Whenever you get into crisis situations such as living out of your car or not having anywhere to go, you can always continue to teach, and your children always want to learn. Children are like sponges. So I started Gifted Minds Academy, and I started helping other children within the community. And a lot of those children are like my own children, or like I was as a young child. And they, a lot of them went without food, a lot of them went without housing. So I brought education to the home and made education a home. And it branched from there. Test scores were going up to with children that were in public school. My children were learning different ways of educating in pro-social, positive pro-social and peer interaction. So I went with it. And hopefully, once I get myself on the ground again, this business will fly high and make a lot of people happy.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about that, because I thought that was really, when I learned that, it changed my whole opinion of what was going on, because you have put so much work into it, and your daughter is in freshman in college now.
Yes, yes.
The proof's in the pudding, as they say.
Yes.
I wanted to sort of transition from there, because I know, Ashton, you're a big advocate of setting children on the right track before they get to school. And I imagine you've probably heard these concerns from other lawmakers in Raleigh about, it's a person's responsibility, parental responsibility. I know you've tried to shepherd through a number of bills aimed at better childcare, early education, and you were a sponsor of the recent Medicaid Expansion bill that would cover up to 600,000 more North Carolinians, and still waiting on that one. So could you give us a quick update on that work and why it's important?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me and for putting together this really critical conversation. When I listened to LaSharon speak, I just feel sad that we have a mom in North Carolina working as hard as she can and feeling like instead of reaching the collective we, reaching our hand out to her, it's not always there. And of all the hardworking North Carolinians, our single moms who are trying to get food on the table and kids to dentist appointments and their educational needs, their success is really all of our success. And I have always felt that their failure is really all of our failures. And so thank you for being willing to share that story with this community, and to the work that Heba is doing to help us redefine in research and statistically what it means that we are really talking about, which really is that every child in North Carolina deserves an opportunity to succeed. And we're a long way from getting there. As you said, I try hard to find ways to make positive steps forward in getting to this promise that all of our children in our state can succeed. And one of the areas that I've really focused on is working in the early child care space. And the early child care space is, in my opinion, one of our most critical and important policy levers that we have as a state. First of all, it is morally the right thing to do to support our youngest North Carolinians. When we are talking about babies, very young children, it is morally right that they are in safe, engaging learning environments. Mm-hmm. But it is also economically right. The current workforce, women make up a significant part of our workforce, particularly in the fields where we are really struggling right now: education, nursing, service industry. Those are all predominantly women. And women left those fields because in the pandemic, we had to take care of our children. I have 3 elementary age kids, and we had to adjust to my own family, and we are blessed with many of the resources to do that. Our current workforce cannot be met if we are not providing the structure and support for children to be in childcare. And our future workforce are the children that are in childcare. And the investment, if you look at any research that's been done nationally and actually internationally, for every $1 we spend in childcare, it pays off $8 to $11 in the long run of investments we don't need to make in other ways farther down that child's life. So it is morally the right thing to do and economically the right thing to do to support our earliest North Carolinians and their families. With that said, we have a very long way to go in North Carolina. Only 6% of eligible North Carolina children are in early Head Start programs. So early Head Start programs are for 0 to 3. And if you are eligible for them, that already means you've met an economic measure that shows you have some at-risk factors. And of those at-risk 0 to 3-year-olds, babies, only 6% in our state of eligible ones get into those early Head Start programs. That's 94% of those babies and families were missing. Only 53%, about half of our eligible pre-K children, which is shown to have lifelong impacts for kids, are enrolled in our pre-K. And in 2019, the average hourly wage of women, it's mostly women working in early childhood, was $10.62, which is not a sustainable wage for the families of the workers that are doing this critical work. So the more I learned, the more that I really grew to value this critical lever of how we support families and from children prenatal through 5 as one of the most important things we can do as a state. And because of this, I started a bipartisan early childhood caucus. We have 42 members from both parties and both chambers who are working together to learn what we can do as policy levers in our state, why it matters. And we are working hard to engage the business community to be a partner with us because it is so critical to current and economic growth of our state as well. And we need more people advocating for this critical time to support moms and families and children. And we have had a little progress. We have just in the past budget, we are really excited because we were able to use some federal dollars to increase the child subsidy rates, which means we're going to have more money going into early child care centers, which is huge. And we've also recently increased our wages program, which provides more support for people working. But we have so much more to do in this space, and I will continue to be advocating for it. The second point that you brought up is Medicaid expansion. I don't know that people always understand what we're talking about with Medicaid expansion, so I'm going to take just a minute to describe it. When the Affordable Care Act passed, it was passed for people under a certain threshold to automatically get Medicaid, and people over a certain threshold to be able to buy insurance on the marketplace. And the intent of the Affordable Care Act is that the people in the middle of those two would be covered with Medicaid, and that states would expand Medicaid to cover the people that were in between, already qualifying in the current definition, and then moving forward, people that could buy it on the marketplace. You guys, in North Carolina, that's like a family of 4 making about $22,000 would be someone that we're talking about. They don't automatically get Medicaid, but they're not making enough yet to be able to get on buy Medicaid insurance in the marketplace. Think about healthcare, having no healthcare and making $22,000 a year for a family of 4.
Yeah.
North Carolina is one of only 12 states. We've had red states and blue states and purple states all over the country pass Medicaid expansion, and North Carolina is only one of 12 that has chosen, the current leadership has chosen not to do so. And last year, the federal government passed new incentives to make it even easier and more cost effective for us to do it. So if we just say yes to expanding Medicaid, we would bring $11.7 billion over 2 years to our state for health care, which would increase healthcare jobs by about 37,000 and cover 634,000 working North Carolinians who are falling in this gap. The fact that the leadership in the General Assembly for the past decade has not done this is a moral failure because we have literally lost North Carolinians' lives. And it's an economic failure because all of healthcare is more expensive and we have billions of dollars that we're just missing out on that other states are getting, almost all of them. So with that said, it has been extremely frustrating because there is economic, moral, all the reasons we should be doing it. I do believe we're closer than ever to getting it passed. So each of us are that have been working on this, are crossing our fingers, crossing our toes, saying our prayers, sending out all the energy and welcoming that as well, because we are so close. Both chambers passed a bill that moved us toward Medicaid expansion, those meaning that the House and Senate did. Those conversations with the governor have continued. We're working with the hospital associations to get everyone on board. So I do believe we are close, and that when we get there, it will be because of people like LaSharon who have been willing to tell their stories for why this matters, that we're able to provide insurance moving forward. So we are close to making progress on that. Anyone listening, I would encourage you to let your legislator know that you support it, but we are close. So, I think, well, those are the two areas. I could talk about others, but certainly healthcare and early childhood are critical when we're talking about supporting our families and not leaving moms on the floor waiting for a handout, but actually reaching our handout.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. I wondered, Heba, if we could turn to you for just a minute. That's sort of that same kind of question. You spend a lot of time talking with lawmakers and policy wonks and all kinds of folks up in Raleigh. What is your take? If these programs are working, why can't we get anything accomplished?
Well, I think that's a great question. I would say that I think that there is. You asked about hope. You asked LaSharon about hope. So I want to remain hopeful tonight. That narrative that I talked about is that blames families instead of challenging systemic failures. It is very strong and persistent. But I think there is an increasing understanding, slowly but surely, that poverty isn't the byproduct of one person's bad decisions. We started about a decade ago down a path of tax cuts that by any measure, these tax cuts disproportionately and unabashedly benefit the wealthy and big businesses. And they leave low and moderate North Carolinians paying more in taxes as a share of their income than wealthy and big companies. And we have been, the rhetoric, the narrative is that they are helping to improve our economy. But I think that more and more people, that has been successful, but more and more people are starting to understand how resilient people in our communities are, like LaSharon, what they have to offer, and that understanding that supporting families is good policy that strengthens our economy, that it isn't a choice between a thriving economy or supporting families. But I think there is slowly an understanding, and I think maybe the realities of a lot of experience during the pandemic, people understood it wasn't the other. People who maybe had never needed to turn to food assistance had to turn to food assistance, or took advantage of programs like the pandemic EBT program through schools. So I think there is this burgeoning understanding that it isn't that choice between a thriving economy or supporting families, because businesses want to operate in a state with quality of life and a strong workforce over the long term. And I think that people are slowly understanding that that means investments in pre-K and early childhood education, like the representative mentioned. And that means good schools that provide, at the very least, a sound and basic education for all students in our state. And it means investments in workforce development programs that help to prepare people for emerging or expanding industries in communities around the state. And I think there's an improving understanding that companies want good quality of life for the people that they're bringing to North Carolina, but also the people that they hire, employees that they hire here. So that means investments in childcare, as I mentioned, but also infrastructure and quality of life, making sure we have clean air, clean water.
Thank you for enlightening that. And thank you for bringing it back to hope. Sometimes we ask questions in this business, and it always sort of sounds really negative, and it's sort of a problem of the business. Ashton, I did want to circle just back to you for real quick. I'm a native North Carolinian, and I know you are too. You grew up in Alamance, I think,
Yep.
where I live now.
Yep.
And so I wanted to ask you a quick question. Growing up, and I'm sure you heard this too, Governor Jim Hunt was a strong advocate of Smart Start and early childhood education. And I know you probably heard a lot of that growing up too. And you had a particular quote that I found from you that I thought was really strong. And I just wanted you to respond to that. And I think you have in some ways, but maybe just a few more minutes
Okay.
to respond to that. You said, as an educator, mother, and lifelong North Carolinian, I believe our state owes every child a chance at success, and strong public schools are the foundation of that promise. The state I grew up in led the South in keeping that promise, and I see the progress slipping away. And so I wanted to just hit on that for a minute, because I know there, among some of the bills you put forward, is a pilot program in Guilford County and $30,000 more for Smart Start. And so can you just sort of expand on, what in your background, with you growing up, what sort of drives what you would like to see North Carolina be?
Yes. So I taught elementary school, kindergarten, first and second grade, and then was an elementary school principal. And my really driving passion, which came from parents. My mom was an elementary school guidance counselor who really taught me that no one is better than anyone else. And my dad was very involved in our community, and he really taught me that we had a responsibility to be involved and give back. And really my driving force is that every child is innocent to where and whom they were born to. And every child deserves the same opportunity at a healthy, happy, successful, positive life as Letty, Briggs, and Bette Clemens. And for many families, because of the historic inequities of our country, it is harder for some families and some children, but it's all of our collective responsibility. And that is what led me to be a teacher. It's what led me to be a principal in a turnaround school in Guilford County. It led me to say yes when I was asked to run for office, though that was not in my grand plan of life. And it has led me to build bridges and look for places where we can stop fighting and start solving problems for those children and families that have really driven me forward. And, Heba taught a little bit, but, the past several years have been conscious decisions about economic policy in our state. To me, we need a healthy balance of reasonable tax structures that does not overburden our working North Carolinians, and we don't want tax structures that negatively impact business recruitment. And we need and must have the resources to invest in the continued future of our state. Guilford County has had two huge economic development announcements in the past 6 months with Toyota's battery manufacturing and Boom Supersonic, both of whom bringing, 1,500 jobs and more each to our county. When they talked about why they picked North Carolina, they talked about because of our education system, because of our infrastructure. North Carolina's strength is investing in people, in our children, and that is what has made us who we are so far, and
Back to you.
how we must. So it really is an honor to really bring all of the work back to those 5-year-olds, and those that's where I started when I was a teacher. But at this point, I really think about those babies in North Carolina, and whether or not they succeed, I really believe is all of our collective responsibility. And I'm going to continue to do what I can in whatever time I have in this role to continue to advocate for them.
Thank you for expanding on that a little bit. I did, as I was driving into work this morning, I thought about it, that economic development that we've been getting in this state. And it's interesting. We're getting a lot more investment, a lot more money coming in, business dollars, business tax dollars, even though we have nice corporate tax policies. But one of the things that I thought about was, some of that money could really help with affordable housing, with childcare, with education. And so as we sort of wrap up tonight's conversation, I wanted to just hear from each of you one or two things that you think state lawmakers could do, or even federal lawmakers, in the next year or the next 12 months to help families in need. And I'd like to start with you, LaSharon, because you're living it. So you're closer to the problem than most of us.
Yeah, living it is very true. I feel like, as Ashton and Heba have said, don't keep us on the ground. Reach out to us, all of us. I have 2 grandchildren. They are 5 months and 19 months old. One mom is working, the other mom is working and going to school, and then my son, he's a senior in high school. So do I just shoot past them and say, figure it out? And then 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they are in the same situation of poverty? Or do I stand ground and help and support and show them the way? So they can't afford childcare. I'm keeping both of my children through the day, throughout the week, so that moms can work, dads can work, mom can go to school, so that they can better themselves and hopefully not live in poverty, continue to live in poverty with my grandchildren. It's like a cycle that has to be broken. But the main thing in this cycle is this the economy, the agencies, the big companies and corporations. So I feel like we need more people on our level that will be able to reach out and be like that middle person, because it's hard when we're like the bottom people trying to go and keep talking to the people up at the top. We need more people down below on the ground, kind of, that can explain both sides. And we need more people. We need to have that money put in the right places, not just pockets and all that stuff up on the top of the hill. We need that money put in place where it needs to go. And it's not just about COVID. That's all I've been hearing about. But poverty and homelessness was here before COVID, and it's going to be here after.
Before you move on, LaSharon, one of the questions that I got from viewers was what choices you've had to make to survive. Can you just briefly hit on that?
Oh, definitely. If I'm there being a caretaker for my grandchildren and my children, it's go to work or be a caretaker for my grandchildren so that their parents can be prosperous and move forward in life. Or again, like I said, do we go out and buy more food once my food stamps run out? Or do I take that cash and put it towards my gas so that I can get kids to doctor's appointments all week along with myself? And another decision, and I've been hearing this a lot, just move to another county. Just move to another county. That's not going to stop poverty. That's not going to stop homelessness. It's in every county. Wake County and Mecklenburg County are just the larger counties, but it's in every county. So it's a lot of sacrifices that you make. I myself have applied to try to get back into school. I want to get my doctorate, but Am I in a situation where I can do that? That's another sacrifice. You see, it goes on and on and on. It's not just, do I go to the nail salon today? No, I don't go to the nail salon. My daughter does my nails. But it's deeper than that. You see what I'm saying? So it's a lot of things. I have special needs children. I have one child that's been from UNC to Duke for the past week. So do I go out and buy actual meat to cook, or do I go cheap and buy sandwich meat and make sure I have enough gas to get my daughter where she needs to go for her medical reasons?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing so freely with us tonight what it's like for you. It takes a lot of courage.
Oh yeah.
It takes a lot of courage to do, and it takes a lot of courage to speak up about it,
Whatever
because
will help.
you get responses, right?
And whoever will listen. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Heba, I wanted to just come back again to that question before about, over the next 12 months, what can we do? What can lawmakers do to sort of move the needle a little bit for families and bring more success to their children and themselves?
Thank you, Tammy, for that question. Yeah, sure. So to give a little bit of context, I'm happy that LaSharon mentioned COVID and mentioned that, this has been an enduring problem before COVID. So, of course, there were too many North Carolinians living in poverty before COVID, and our underinvestment in our state has a much longer history than just COVID. So for a little bit of context, right now, 1 in 5 North Carolina kids is living in poverty, and more than 100 North Carolina kids are eligible for child care assistance, but they don't receive it because of limited funding. And as Representative Clemens mentioned, lack of child care is keeping a lot of people, we estimate around 200,000 North Carolina parents, out of employment. It's a barrier to employment for more than 200,000 North Carolina parents. So as you touched on, Tammy, every time that we cut taxes, we reduce dollars available to invest in things that we care about, in those programs that make a difference to our children and our families in North Carolina. So I will give the example of the phase out of the state corporate income tax. If we paused that phase out right now and we kept the corporate income tax rate at 2.5%, that would provide $1 billion annually to fund those programs and services that we need, that are important to our families. So that's $1 billion for early childhood education for all children in our state. That's $1 billion to ensure a sound basic education for all kids per our constitutional requirement. That's dollars for workforce development. And as you've heard from the representative and I, employers moving to our state and in our state care about these things. It's not an either or an or. It makes sense economically, and it makes sense, as the representative mentioned, morally, and it makes sense for the futures of our kids. So it's really time that we ensure that every single one of our North Carolina kids is given the opportunity to thrive. And for some policy specifics, that means making child care safe, high quality, early childhood education and care more affordable for parents. And it means investing in the industry as a whole. And that means suspending the corporate tax phase out and instead enacting tax credits like the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit, making them in our state fully refundable and generous. So these tax credits are well known, they're targeted to low and moderate income North Carolinians, and they're well known, or North Carolinians with kids, and they're well known to have a very positive impact on the families who receive them. So just to give you a few examples, they can reduce low birth weight births in babies. They can improve physical and mental health, improve nutrition, and even improve educational outcomes and the future earning potential of kids and families that claim them. So basically, it's time to invest in our North Carolina families.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. That's a lot packed into a small space. Ashton, I want to kind of sort of wrap that question up with you, but when I turn to you, I'd also like to talk a little bit about COVID. We didn't mention that tonight, but COVID, the Budget and Tax Center has come out with reports that show that COVID funding really made a difference for a lot of families, and over 300,000 children were lifted out of deep poverty with those tax credits that were distributed last year. So one of the things you mentioned was childcare subsidies, and I think, I don't know for sure, but there were 20,000 kids on the waiting rolls, and now there's many, many less. And I know some counties use that money from ARPA funds, federal recovery money for COVID, to subsidize more childcare. And so, as part of what we can do over the next 12 months, I kind of wanted you to hit on how do we, when this money runs out at the end of the year, how do we keep that going?
Yes. So I'll answer that first, which is I think that's a major concern especially from the childcare industry. They are talking about a lot significant resources were used from federal relief dollars for childcare stabilization grants, which were able to keep people employed, able to keep people using their spaces. And for many families, childcare is already cost prohibitive, and we are going to get to a cliff of not being able to sustain those increased wages, or not being able to keep the families that we've been able to buoy in this time in childcare. So that is a major concern moving forward. Something that's near and dear to my heart is we have been since COVID, all children have received free breakfast and lunch in elementary schools or all schools across our countries. So families didn't have to worry about the paperwork or sending in 40 cents if they qualified for reduced lunch. All children, no stigmas, could get free breakfast and lunch. And I was just at my own child's open house tonight. That has gone away. That's going to mean children are not going to get the food that they need. There are a lot of things we put in place that are things that should have already been true. It should already be true that children can have breakfast and lunch no matter what, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not true, unfortunately. And so it should already be true that we are providing investment supports to keep our childcare industry functioning for families and the economy. That has what we've done, but we're going to be at a place where we're not doing that anymore. So I think in some ways COVID helped because it made clearer, though it was clear to a lot of people living it, what those crisis points are. And, we did right by our citizens in a lot of ways. And now we're coming to the end of that, and we really are going to have to struggle with what does it mean to take some of those supports away, particularly for kids. But, in short, we can do a lot in 12 months, actually. We could expand Medicaid and cover $650,000, 650,000 more North Carolinians that are working with healthcare. Very easily, we can do that. The plan is there. We should and can do that. We could easily use the $6 billion that we chose not to use in this budget, that leadership chose not to use, to increase affordable housing in North Carolina, to increase workforce development training so that people have jobs, to increase support for childcare spaces. We could choose to do that. We could choose to honor the dignity of the work of North Carolinians by increasing the minimum wage to a sustaining wage of $15 an hour. We could choose to do that. There are a lot of things we can do, and ought not let anyone off the hook until we get some of those things done. So that's what I'll be working on. There is a lot that we can do to solve. The challenges are big. And we can make progress on them if we can get the collective will of leadership and rally to do it.
Mm-hmm. No small task.
No. But these things help, and it helps. I would love for LaSharon to come to Raleigh. It helps for this stories of the everyday North Carolinians to get to the people making decisions. We need more of that. And Tammy, that's why I'm so grateful to you for doing this series,
Yes.
and raising the voices of the people that really make our state and are making the future of our state.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. We wouldn't have had anything without the mothers. So
Yeah.
hats off. And so I guess I have to wrap up. I'm sorry I have to end this conversation. I was actually learning a lot. But that's all the time we have tonight. And so I'd like to thank all of you guys for the work that you do and the conversations that we've had. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about it as the year sort of winds up. Thank you for our audience to join us. We're so happy that you guys came and listened in. And if you have any questions, you need to reach out. You can get me at tgrubb@heraldsun.com or on Twitter or Facebook, same Tammy Grubb. So please let me know what you think. And if you have ideas, share those too. Thank you. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.